What's up, everyone? Here at the back nine of Woodsboro long layout, green tees to the white baskets. Hole 10 is 426 feet. It's a par 4. A little bit of a narrow gap off the tee here. I like to try to hit it with a forehand and ideally get something to skip down where that island is and the yellow basket. This one hit a tree early and kicked here off to the left a bit. You can also try to hit this gap with a backhand with a little bit of flex on it, and then flex out towards where that island is. The angle for the backhand just isn't ideal off of the tee. The hallway where you have to throw the disc is a little bit offset, so it just fits the forehand line a little better. This hole plays pretty straight for the first 300 feet or so, and then right about where that disc ends up, it bends off to the left for about 125 feet. As we get around this corner, you'll also see that the basket is on a side hill. That tends to be a theme on this back nine. A lot of these baskets will sit on side hills, so you have to watch the rollaways. This green has a little bit of a log barrier there to catch some of those rollaways, but you have to watch the rollaways. And then a lot of the baskets play a little bit elevated just because they sit up on these hills, so you're not completely flat when you're putting. Here's an example of those rollaways. This one just hits the cage and then rolls down to about 35 feet. My putting this day wasn't very good. I think I probably lost 5 or 6 strokes just on the putting green. This one sails past, and then I tap out for a triple bogey on hole 10. Hole 11, it's 356 feet. It's a par 5. It's hard to tell in this first clip, but this first tee shot plays pretty uphill, so it's uphill probably 40 feet or so. You're really just trying to lay something about 125 feet up here. Shorter is actually better. As you can see, we just passed it, but there's a right hand gap that's way more open than trying to filter through all of these trees here. So even if you just chip something to the top of the hill about 100 feet, you have more of a backhand or a super turned over forehand that you can get around this corner. It's kind of like an S-shaped hole. It goes straight off to the right and then straight at the end. It just plays so uphill. From tee to basket, you're probably gaining 75 feet or so. Once you get to the top of the hill, it is pretty flat. You just have to have a good upshot to get up there to the basket. Again, it's perched on a side slope, so anything that gets up there and stands up just rolls to about 45 feet down that hill. This is a par 5, so the birdie is in play if you have your first 2 shots that are really good. It's just a super tricky one to hit. Hole 12 here, it's 317 feet. It's a par 3. It plays pretty flat from tee to the basket, but between the two, there's this fairly significant ravine down the side of this hill. The forehand play, you kind of just chip something down to the bottom of this ravine and then try to play something back up the other side. You can try to blast a backhand through that same gap that I hit with the forehand. Sometimes you can get it to the top of this second hill. It's a hard gap to hit though. There's still a bunch of trees in this ravine that you kind of have to get lucky and filter through. So from the bottom of the hill there's just this little pitch up to the top. And then again, side hill lie. The basket's also a little tilted on this hole, but you have to watch the rollaways. They'll roll all the way down that hill there. Again, putting wasn't great this day. Tap out for a double bogey. Hole 13, 311 feet. It's a par 3. There's that left-hand gap that I hit with the forehand there. There's also a right-hand backhand gap here that I walk through. I think the backhand gap here, you can get further down this fairway, but you also run the risk of kicking way down to the right off of any of these trees. And if you don't hit anything down there, it'll go all the way down to the bottom of that hill. So I like the forehand up the left gap. It just matches the slope a little bit better. And then usually ends up in the middle here for an upshot. Again, you have to get lucky through a bunch of these trees up by the basket. But ideally an upshot and then a putt for par. A lot of these holes here on the back nine, a par is usually gaining strokes on the field. Back nine's definitely harder than the front. Hole 14 here, 366 feet. That's what UDisc says. It's definitely about 150 feet further, so it plays close to 500. Off the tee, it's that forehand that I hit, or it's a backhand around this tree here in the middle. The narrow fairway curls a little bit to the right as you get down into this area, so I just like the forehand better. It shapes up a little nicer for once you get down to this area. The mistake on this hole is hitting anything early, left or right. Then you're just pitching back out to the fairway and you're scrambling to save a bogey at that point. As you can see from this shot, the fairway is definitely this left gap all the way down the length of the hole. I end up early releasing this forehand here and forcing myself to go down the right, which you'll see is super narrow and a bit tricky. This hole is pretty flat from the tee to the basket. It's just really long and it's hard to hit that gap consistently for the whole length of this hole. The club out here, again, is Fred Rock Disc Golf Club. They also maintain Emmitsburg and a couple of the other courses in this area. They do a great job, as you can see on this fairway and a bunch of them here on the back. They're woods golf, but the fairways are super well maintained, and then in the summer, the brush is usually cut back pretty good, so they're super playable even when you have those summer months that everything tends to get overgrown. Hole 15, 280 feet, par 3. There's this little gap off the tee that I try to hit with a forehand. It's really just tee and then hundreds of trees and then a basket. So it's kind of pick your gap that you're going to try to hit and then just scramble the rest of the way down to the basket. The basket is down here on the right hand side a little bit. So if you can play a forehand, you have to get lucky to sneak through all of these trees. But it does shape up better for the forehand line. Again, everything from about 150 feet in is just get lucky, try to find a gap and hit a gap. Most of the time it doesn't work. This is a hole that you can take a double or triple pretty easily. Here it's just a pitch down. Again, this sits on a little bit of a slope here, so rollaways are a potential past the basket. Tap out here and take my double bogey. Hole 16, 488 feet. Off the tee, it's this backhand flex shot, so turn something over early and get it to flex out there at the end. There used to be a tree here in the middle where that stump is that made this hole way more difficult off the tee, but now that's opened up a little bit, it's just a flex shot down here. About 250 to 300 feet would be ideal. Again, these fairways are super well maintained. From here, this is a pretty typical landing zone. It's try to turn something over through that kind of fairway in the middle. That one leaked out a little bit to the left on me. This hole is pretty flat, except for all the trees. But from the tee to the basket, there's not really any elevation gain or anything. And this green is a fairly flat green. So you can run most of your putts with this. Throw a little tomahawk through there and then try to make a 20-foot putt. This is another hole, if you get off the fairway early, this can easily turn into a 2 or 3 over par. Little 20-foot putt here, which I make, and stay at 17. Hole 17, 273 feet. It's a pretty hard right to left slope. It plays along the side of this hill and the basket's down at the bottom. That backhand line that I tried to hit through this gap is kind of a weird shape. You kind of have to hyzer it and then let it push at the end. I threw a forehand through this the other day and just turned it all the way over, and I think it worked out a lot better. With the turnover forehand, I usually ended up somewhere down in this area. It's not really a birdie look, but it gives you a little pitch up and a par putt more consistently than I think trying to hit that gap with a backhand. So that's probably my play going forward, is the turnover forehand through that right hand gap. Down here is where the mistake is. Anything that leaks out a little bit early on you, you get jailed on all those trees down there on the left. And then forces you to at least take a bogey, if not worse. Little pitch up there and a tap out for a bogey. Hole 18, 367 feet. It plays pretty downhill from the tee to the basket, probably down about 25 to 30 feet in elevation. I like the forehand flex line off the tee, hitting this initial gap and then just flexing down towards the basket. You can also try to throw the backhand flex, where you swing it out wide to the right and then have it crash in. It does open up pretty good here down towards the basket, so one of the more open holes here on the back nine. Good way to end your round here, coming down towards the parking lot. All these little ravines here, sometimes they're creeks, are all casual, so you don't really have to worry about those. And then ideal tee shot gets down here to about 25 to 35 feet. Really a pretty good birdie look if you can get clean through everything. So that's the long course here at Woodsboro. Thanks for watching.